Hi, my name is Ben Hales, and this is the 6th part of an exclusive 7-part video series for TournamentPokerEdge.com. In this video, I'm going to be continuing to examine the Hold'em Manager 2 reports and filters. The winning summary report can be opened by clicking on the More Reports button here. This report breaks down your data by blind levels and also by table type and size. If you have played any alternative formats of poker, you might need to filter by game type to remove any unwelcome data. For instance, I have a few Omaha hands on this report which I'd like to remove, so I'm going to click on game type here and All Hold'em. This has now filtered out any Omaha hands. Now, if I scroll down to the lowest blind levels, you can see that for each blind level, this report shows my performance at full ring, heads up, and 6 max. As with the 2 stack size reports I looked at in the previous video, this report can be used to check how well you are adjusting to the various stages in tournaments. Lots of players specialise at certain tournament types and feel comfortable with the format and pace of the tournament, but when they enter a different type of tournament, they might struggle with how aggressively to play at the various stages. This report is useful for highlighting this type of weakness. You might want to order the report by big blinds 1 per 100 hands, as this measurement is a good indicator of how well you are performing. You can also use the expected value big blinds per 100 hands, which we looked at previously. If you've got any of these in red, you can start looking at the stats in more detail to find out what is happening to cause you to lose money. I can see here I have plenty in red, but I'm not concerned by the small sample sizes. Nevertheless, I am losing money slightly in the mid stages of these full ring SNGs. If I now look at my core stats, I notice that my VPIP, pre-flop raise and 3-bet stats are all fairly conservative when I'm playing with a big blind size of 50 to 200. I could now, if I wanted to, go back to the position report and filter for my performance at full ring and see whether this is related to position and check in more detail what I'm doing wrong and whether I'm not being active enough in mid or late position. I could set myself some targets to increase my aggression level. Another thing that you can do here is to order the report by total hands. This way you can focus on the situations you are most often faced by. I can see that I've been playing mainly 6 max, and I'm very happy with my performance across all those blind levels. But if you run this report and spot a weakness, look at your core stats and think about what you might be doing wrong. There are 7 stats listed on this report: VPIP, pre-flop raise, 3-bet, went to showdown percentage, $1 at showdown percentage, aggression factor and aggression percentage. You can, as always, add to this if you want, but they're pretty sensible statistics. What you want to ensure is that all the stats are showing an increasing amount of aggression as the blind levels increase, especially the post-flop aggression factor stat. You can also do this on the stack sizes report. If you spot any deviation in this trend of aggression, you'll know that you are doing something wrong and that you need to address it. I have preloaded the following 5 reports with a date range set of just this year, so there's minimal amount of data on these reports and they're fairly simple to read. The first 2 are called Tournament Results by Day and Tournament Results by Hour. They're located here and here. They're very straightforward to understand and well worth a glance. You might find that you are more profitable on certain days of the week. Sunday has always been my best day for playing, and Tuesday through to Thursday have traditionally been my toughest days. This is not necessarily reflected in the data in front of me, but historically that has been the case. Similarly, if you look at the hour of day that you play, so I'm just moving on to the tournament results by hour report, you'll see that there's a 24-hour schedule, and I have been playing between the hours of 12 and 20, and you might find that one time of day is particularly profitable for you. For those of you with flexibility in your own playing schedule, this is definitely information worth knowing. It may also depend on which site you're playing. The next 3 reports are all graphs, and you can get to these here, here and here. The first one is called the In the Money graph. It's a really simple report showing how your in the money and ROI progress over time or over tournament numbers, as I have it here. You can change that option here to days or months. It's probably left best as per tournaments. As a sit and go player, my results here, as you can see, are fairly consistent over even just 200 tournaments, but for multi-table players your results are going to go up and down a lot more, as there's much more variance. It's a nice way of seeing your ups and downs. The more data you've got in here, the better, the more accurate the graph will be. The tournament finish distribution graph shows your breakdown of positions over time. That looks pretty messy and confusing to me. Let's try another style of graph by clicking on the options button in the bottom left here. Let's try a stacked column graph. This is an alternative way of seeing that I'm finishing first and second more often than I'm finishing sixth. I can also filter out certain positions, as I'm mainly playing 6 max and I'm not interested in mixed data. So there you can see just those 6 positions included. The tournament winnings graph is a quick and useful way of checking on how much money you have won. It differs from the information supplied on the results graph button, which I discussed in the previous video. That graph showed us the net chips won, whereas this graph displays tournament winnings. You can and should click on the luck adjusted winnings here. As you can see, on the few occasions I have played on PokerStars this year, I've been slightly lucky, as my green line is just about above my red line. I know that this red line is accurate for single table games. I'm unsure of how accurate it is across multi-tables. When you have a graph report open, you'll notice that the hands are not displayed at the base of the page. This is not me hiding them, that they're really not there. In addition, some of the filters are not available, and there are certain restrictions. You can't see every stat imaginable on the graphs. Please note though that you can still use the date range filter and the tournament type filter if you want to streamline the data displayed on your graphs. The number of players report is the next report I'm going to look at. This is another very useful report from a coaching perspective. As with the 3 reports we have already examined, which deal with stack sizes or blind levels, this report gives you valuable information about how well you are performing at each stage of a tournament. Once again, the big blinds per 100 hands is your key performance measure. Do you have any rows in red? Do you have a weakness when things get short-handed? A lot of multi-table players don't practice enough single-table games, so they're only exposed to short-handed play in a critical final table condition. If you think there's a weakness there, jump into a few single-table games to get some practice. My stats all look very logical to me, with an increasing amount of aggression being shown. Your went to showdown stats should increase slightly, and your $1 at showdown should decrease as the number of players at the table decreases. Most players won't see such a sharp rise of pre-flop raise as you see in my stats. I am a big fan of limping in on low blind levels when I'm playing with poor opponents, and that's the reason for my low pre-flop raise early on in tournaments. In medium or higher stake tournaments, you can't get away with this amount of limping. Let's now take a look at some more filters. I want to check that in the early stages of tournaments I'm not committing all my chips pre-flop with anything weaker than, say, Queen Queen. So if I click on the more filters, and the first thing I can do is use the quick filter all in pre-flop. So I select that and click the green plus arrow and it's applied. As we've seen previously, some of these quick filters are duplicated elsewhere. Let's click on the Advanced Filters submenu, which is the final one located here, and you'll see that all in pre-flop is also available here. In the Advanced Filters there are a lot of really specialized circumstances that you can filter for, divided up by the 5 sections: pre-flop, flop, turn, river and other. From a coaching perspective, let me just quickly list a small sample of those which I think are really useful. Pre-flop could squeeze, pre-flop in blind and defended steal, pre-flop in big blind and re-raised flop, facing flop continuation bet, flop continuation bet possible, flop pot size in big blinds is, flop players on flop is, turn continuation bet possible. Then in the other category down at the bottom, I like all in win percentage is and facing all in bet. In fact, I'm going to use one of these now. I want to find pots where I've gone all in pre-flop early in a tournament with less than a 65% chance of winning. In single table tournaments, that's bad poker. So I'm going to select all in win percentage is and less than 65%, and then click the green plus arrow, and you'll see there all in pre-flop is true and all in win percentage is less than 65. Now I want to filter for my effective stack size to be greater than, say, 40 big blinds, so I'm only looking at deep stacked situations. Remember that tournament type and stack size filters are on the first submenu here. So I scroll down to where it says effective stack, choose greater than and type in 40, click the green plus arrow, and that is then applied. I'm now ready to look at my data. As you can see, there's 439 hands to look at, which is a lot, but it's a manageable number and very useful data. In poker, I always say that part of becoming a winning player is thinking not about the chips that you win, but the chips that you don't throw away. This selection of hands might teach me a few things about where I'm throwing away chips. Now, it's just occurred to me that I could have filtered slightly more effectively. I wanted to look at hole cards where I wasn't happy going all in this type of situation. To do that, if I go back into the more filters, I can add an additional filter to take out aces, kings, maybe queens, hands where early in a tournament I'm going to be reasonably happy to be all in. Queens is a bit arguable, but aces and kings certainly I'm happy to commit all my chips with. And if we now take out that data, you'll see that about 70 of the hands have disappeared. So there's only 370 now to sift through. That's an effective use of the filters. Let's move on now to discuss the next group of reports. If you look at the pre-flop section here, there are 3 additional reports: hand groupings, hole cards and pre-flop activity, all of which I've preloaded onto my computer. The hand groupings report divides up your information and performance by groups of hole cards. It might be useful for you to highlight a specific hand type that you struggle with. Personally, I don't use this report, as I much prefer the next report, the hole cards report. This report does much the same thing, but it breaks down the data for every single possible hand. I think it's much more revealing, especially if you've got a decent sample size. As you can see, there are a few Omaha hands that have crept into my data here. To remove those, go to game type and just select all Hold'em, and that filter will remove those Omaha hands which you're unlikely to want mingled with your Hold'em cards. Now, we've already looked at the hole cards grid, which is located here in a previous video, so I'm not going to display this again now, but it is a fantastic way of picking up on a specific hole card that you're struggling with. For me, the advantage of using the report to do the same thing is that you can then immediately start looking at the reason why. Why are you struggling? Well, you might have your VPIP and pre-flop raise or 3-bet stat too high. You can analyze what the problem is. You might prefer to use a combination of the grid and then the report, or you might just prefer one or the other. For me, I like the report, and it's a report that I will go to with every new client I have who has the data available. Most of us, including myself, have small misperceptions as to the strength of each different hand in poker. As a result, we tend to overplay or underplay certain hands. Our gut feeling subconsciously impacts on our decision making to our own detriment. If you order this report, because right now it's kind of in an alphabetical order, if you order it by perhaps big blinds 1 per 100 hands or 1 hand percentage, what you'll find is it orders the cards by their natural rank. So aces, kings, queens, ace, king suited, jacks, ace, king off, etc., etc. If when you do this there's any deviation from that natural rank, that's an indication that there's a problem with a specific hand. I'm now going to quickly, because we did this in the previous video as well, I'm going to quickly include the expected value big blinds per 100 hands, such an important statistic, and so let's get it in there. Click OK and reload. And when you're dealing with just a few thousand hands, there could be some discrepancies between performance and expected value performance, and really the EV big blinds per 100 hands is the more accurate of the two measurements. So that's why I like to have this one in. Let's order by one hand's percentage this time, and you'll see that the same order comes out: aces, kings, ace king suited, etc, etc. There's no deviation with mine because I've got enough data in here and I'm playing the hands reasonably well. Note that suited hands are dealt to you 3 times less often than non-suited hands, so you will have less data for them. For that reason, the net 1 column isn't the best one to use when comparing results. Now, as I scroll down my list of hole cards, I can see that ace 5 off there is the first hand where I'm disappointed by my performance. For you it might be completely different, but obviously check the hands that are similar. So in this case, ace 4 off, ace 3 off, good ones to compare it with, just about profitable with those. Ace 2 off, I'm having a horror show with ace 2, so I'm inclined to think I need to change what I'm doing with this group of hands. The next thing to do is to check the core stats, and I can see my VPIP 37, 39, pre-flop raise 24, ace 5 off 43 and 29. I'm probably playing these too often, and I'm probably raising with them too early in tournaments in the cutoff and the button, and I can probably hold off doing this. Maybe I'm getting caught raising with inadequate hands, and that's most likely to be the case. At this point in my analysis, I would now switch to the position report, possibly look at the deep stacked and short stacked situations and hone in on the problem and come up with an appropriate fix. But right now I want to continue focusing on this report, as it is very often a report which reveals leaks in a player's game, and I think can be very beneficial to you. Often the cause of poor results is going to be overplaying certain hand types. At the bottom of the report, VPIP and pre-flop raise ought to look something like this. As you get right down to the bottom, the VPIP drops almost to 0, as you can see here. If you scroll back up, I can see that I start to play certain hands a little bit more often, and there's a strange one. 2-3 suited. I'm playing 12.3% of the time, but I'm not really doing very well with it. Maybe I'm overplaying it. Once again, if I wanted to, I could now start going into an in-depth analysis of this hand using the reports and filters. Common problems I see with players are overplaying ace 6 to ace 9 offsuit, poor performance with suited connectors, and poor performance with low pocket pairs. If you notice any of those things happening, you know you've found a leak in your game. You can also order this by VPIP and pre-flop raise too, and scroll down in a similar manner to find hands that you're overplaying, or in a few cases underplaying. Now let's look at the final report, the final pre-flop report, the pre-flop activity report. This is definitely an interesting report. It's perhaps not a report that you'll use very often, but it's well worth a visit. What you're looking at is a breakdown of how well you perform, broken down by pre-flop action facing you. My stats are fairly typical. I do badly when facing a raiser or more than one raiser, so big blinds 1 per 100 hands, well into the negative for all of those situations. But I keep my VPIP low in those situations. Most of the time when someone raises, I fold. I could probably work on increasing my 3-bet and 4-bet stats so I'm not flat calling raises too much. You should be making money when the pot is unopened or there are limpers in front of you. Check how much you are making. Could you increase or decrease your VPIP or pre-flop raise? Often when I'm coaching using hand histories, the result of a particular hand does not back up my advice. So I particularly like this report for providing irrefutable proof. It definitely helps players whose VPIP is too high when facing a raiser. It's very in-your-face evidence that trying to gamble against a raiser is usually a bad plan. And that leaves us with the final two reports, which are the showdown reports. Personally, I don't use these two reports as I don't see much benefit in them. The non-detailed version, which we're looking at now, this simply shows you how well you perform broken down by the value of your hand at showdown. The information is interesting, but I'm not sure how I can use it. I feel similarly about the detailed report. This report defines the value of the hand more precisely. So you can see, if I scroll down, you can see that, for example, with one pair, you've got 6 separate categories. One pair on board, top pair, top kicker, top pair, second pair, pocket pair, over pair, and lower pair. I prefer this report as I think you need the detail to make sense of the numbers. The problem I have is I don't know how to use it. If you have any suggestions on these reports or ideas on any of the reports, please leave your comments. So that completes my run through of all the reports in Hold'em Manager 2. I'm going to conclude this video by looking in a bit more detail at the filters. I know I've looked at some of these already, but the filters really are my favourite part of Hold'em Manager 2, and I really want to encourage as many of you as possible to invest a few hours using these filters so you can do meaningful analysis to drive improvements to your game. So let's look at some more. Remember, in the More Filters window, there are 9 sub-menus on the left-hand side. The quick filters are in the bottom right, and on the front dashboard, you've got your date range, you've got game type, and you've got your tournament tags here. Let's start by applying a quick filter. There's a quick filter called Donk Bet Flop. I'm going to apply this now and click OK. So immediately gets applied to the report that I'm in, and I can see pretty quickly that this is not a tactic I use very often. Only 740 examples of me donk betting. When I am choosing to do it, I'm doing very well with the tactic, probably because I'm choosing decent hands and good spots. I can see that I'm only really doing this from the blind positions. If I want to apply this now to the stack size report, I can use the Apply to All Reports button and click on the stack size, and this now filters that data, and I can see those 740 hands broken down by stack size. I'm a little bit concerned about the 51 hands at the bottom. I shouldn't really be donk betting inside push fold, so these I can only assume are mistakes. At the bottom I can see that King is one of the hands. I'm probably trying to trap an opponent when I'd be better off just shoving back. Only Ace is really worth trapping with inside push fold, and even then it looks very suspicious. Interestingly, when the effective stack is around 12 to 18 big blinds, this can be quite a good time to cold call a raise out of position and then donk bet the flop. I can see that when I try this I'm doing pretty well, so I might try it a bit more often. Remember, 700 examples out of 600,000 hands It's not much more than 1 in 1,000. Sometimes when I'm coaching, common questions crop up which are difficult to answer. Answering them using statistics is a powerful tool. One of those questions is, do I limp with small and medium pairs, or do I raise? Instead of me answering that myself, let's use Holdem Manager 2. So I've cleared the filters from the previous search. Let's now choose the quick filter limp and use the green plus arrow, and it goes into the applied filters. You can, as an alternative, do this yourself with the preflop action facing hero and then VPIP yes, preflop raise no, and achieve the same thing, but you might as well use the shortcut. The second filter I need to apply is the type of hold cards. I want small and medium pairs, so I'm going to select none, turn on the pocket pairs, deselect by single clicking the premium pairs that I don't want, and then click OK, and that's my search. I can see when I'm limping, I'm making 48.99 big blinds per 100 hands. It's a healthy profit. I'm doing particularly well in deep stack situations, and as we drop down you can see 11 to 15, 0 to 10, not really sensible to be limping at these stages, and there's a few examples, and I'm making a few chips but not too many. Let's now go back in and compare that with what happens when we raise. So I'm going to take off the limp filter, and I'm now going to add the quick filter preflop raise. Click on OK. Wait a second, and now you can see I am making 108.3 big blinds per 100 hands. So although I have a habit of limping in certain tournament situations with these small and medium pairs, this is irrefutable evidence I'm making more than double as much when I choose to raise. That doesn't mean to say that I'm always going to choose to raise in the future. Tournament situation, stack sizes, opponent information, action in front of me, these are all factors which are going to influence my decision. But this statistical knowledge is sure going to make me more inclined to raise in the future. I'm now interested to know how these statistics look when I'm faced by a raiser. Should I be calling or re-raising? So let's go to the basic filters and choose the preflop action facing me. So it's going to be raiser or two raisers, I guess, any of the raising situations. Once I've done that, I set the VPIP to yes and the preflop raise and 3-bet to no, and then click on OK. Now I can see I am now making 65.27 big blinds per 100 hands, which seems pretty good. But what about when I 3-bet? Let's go back in and change the preflop raise to any and the 3-bet to yes, and click OK and wait. Wow, once again I'm making more than double as much when I choose the more aggressive play with my small and medium pairs. I'm still a fan of set mining cheap in the early stages of tournaments, but you can't argue with that data. You could use similar reports and filters to find out how well you're doing with suited connectors, suited aces, or any other hands that you wanted. Let's clear those filters and have a look again at the 9 submenus in the filters. You should now have a feel for what we have in here. Tournament filters deal with tournaments and stack sizes. Basic filters and hold cards we've just looked at. Omaha hold cards I'm not concerned with. The fifth one, board texture, is a phenomenal post-flop coaching tool. Let's say I wanted to examine how I should play middle pair on a dry board when I'm playing out of position. The way I'd do that is, first of all, I only want to look at flop situations. So on the board texture, I'm going to uncheck the turn and the river. You want to do that because there's enough data in here to choose from. You don't want it cluttered up. At the bottom of the screen, you've got some conditional words, or and. These two words you can use to refine your search. You can join together these conditions. So to get a really specific search, you might use the word and to broaden the search, you might use the word or. I want to have a specific search, so I'm going to select and. I want a flop with a rainbow flop, and I also want my flop to have 0 connected cards. I want it unpaired. That's my flop. It's a very specific type of flop, a very dry flop that I'm looking for, and that should give me some narrow amounts of data. I don't want too much data being returned. I also said I wanted middle pair. So to get middle pair, I come to hand values, the 6th submenu, and I choose filter by flop hand strength. If you're on the turn, you've got the turn and then the river. More often than not, you'll be on the flop. And what do I want? I want 1 pair and I want 2nd pair. Ace kicker, or, notice at the bottom, or and, or non-ace kicker. The and here won't work because you can't have both together. Right now I've defined my flop and the type of flop that I've hit, so middle pair. I just want to include my being out of position. To do that, it's in the basic filters, remember, position always here. There's an easy one, relative position, out of position, and click on OK, and that should return 1318 hands. What I want to do now is to compare how well I perform when I choose each of the following 3 actions. 1, leading out, 2, check calling, and 3, check raising. To do this, I'm going to use the 7th submenu, which is filter by actions. You can come here to filter for your pre-flop actions. You can come here for flop, turn or river actions. I use it mainly for flop actions, and in this example I want to see what happens when I choose bet. So I'm adding this to my filters, clicking OK. It's narrowed now to 444. When I choose bet, I make 100 big blinds per 100 hands. Pretty good. Okay, let's get back in there. Change the action from bet to check. I wanted to try check call. Check call, okay. Load it up. 170 examples, minus 64 big blinds per 100. Not so hot. Go back in. Filter by actions. I don't want check call. I'm going to just get rid of that. Check raise. Yes, it's in there. Click OK. 67 examples. OK. 300 big blinds per 100. That's looking like a smart option. One last thing I'm going to check is what happens as a combined action. Is checking any good or not? So filter by actions. Check any. X asterisk is the symbol, and 655 examples of me checking and then going on to make a profit of 22 big blinds per 100 hands. Now, there are going to be instances when the board, even though I've chosen a specific board, there's going to be instances where there's more danger than others. There's going to be tournament situations where you're not going to want to lead the betting out of position. But there are going to be a lot of spots where you do want to make that donk bet out of position. And actually, this is evidence that the more aggressive action is getting a better result than the passive one. So although I'm not a fan of leading the betting out of position, this search has told me that I could do this a bit more often in this kind of spot. Another useful filter I can apply to this data is one which filters for heads-up situations or non-heads-up situations. As a single table tournament player, I have a lot of heads-up data in my database, whereas multi-tournament players won't have so much. To filter for heads-up data, I go to the basic filters and I select the number of players in the hand between 2 and 2. Click on OK. And I can now compare how I'm doing when I check first or when I bet first. So here, I'm getting 81.8 big blinds per 100 hands. Let's go back in, filter by actions. Instead of check any, go back and choose bet. And when I lead out heads up, there's 92 examples. I'm actually doing slightly worse. I'm still doing okay, but I'm doing slightly worse. My checking in the heads up situation seems to be making more sense. Perhaps there's a good reason why that's the case, but it's very interesting data nonetheless. To filter for non-heads up data, I'm not going to do this now, but the way you would do it is go to basic filters and choose 3 to 10 players, and that does the opposite of what I've just done. I'm going to clear those filters now. I'm going to save the final example of how to use the filters for the 7th and final part of this video series. It's going to involve how to use the filter by bet size. I hope that today I've whetted your appetite with my examples of the powerful information that can be obtained from Hold'em Manager's reports and filters. With the standard of online poker continuing to improve, you're going to need every advantage you can get. If anyone would like to share any of their own favourite reports and filters, please leave comments and feedback. This was the 6th part of a 7-part series. In the final part, I'm going to be discussing your database, active session, opponents, marking hands, and the Hold'em Manager 2 replayer. My name is Ben Hales, and my details are at www.tournamentpokeredge.com. Thank you for watching.